Imperial Commander. Now that we've played a game, we can talk in a little more depth about this. We can talk from experience, and there are some things that we discovered through play. And despite what anyone will tell you, it is through play that you really explore the rules space. Until you've experienced a game, you can't really say what it's like, how it feels. To be fair, having only played a 250-point game, I have a long way to go. And in fact, we will be doing another video here sometime in the hopefully not too distant future. I have a couple of 500 and about 50-point forces. This is the Equine. This is the Human Defense Force. And I don't know, I can bring it closer, but is that even worthwhile? This is going to be like a nightmare trying to get this to focus and get the lighting right. We can try. Oh, there's my Equine. See, I got some assault guys, and then these guys have rocket launchers, and then I have a general for the humans, and I got a general for the Equine. He's the red lizard. There they are, ready to assault. Once we've played that 550-point game, I think we're going to be in a much better position to discuss this game at length. But there's a few things that we can say now that we've played. And the first thing I want to talk about is I'm not convinced that this really was the ancestor, the direct, what would you call it, the direct father of Warhammer 40K. To be fair, you can see the glimmers of it in here. You can see that in the gleam of the eye of Imperial Commander is Warhammer 40K, but the connection isn't really as strong as I had thought, as I had been led to believe. And you got to be careful when you hear these folk histories. Oh yeah, Imperial Commander, well, it's by Richard Halliwell, and therefore Richard Halliwell was Games Workshop, and I know Games Workshop. That means this must be the Warhammer 40K. Well, don't slow your roll there, Chief, because the rules in this game are very different. Like and now that I've experienced it, it feels a lot different. There is a roll to hit and then a roll to wound. Well, okay, show me a game that doesn't have that, right? 99% of the games out there have a, did you hit him? Did you hurt him? Dungeons and Dragons has that. It doesn't mean Dungeons and Dragons is the secret father of Warhammer 40K. Warhammer 40K is not a bastard child of, I mean, maybe it is if you think that Warhammer was inspired by Dungeons and Dragons, but I don't know, man. It's a little tenuous for me. To be fair, and we're going to say that a lot here. I don't think that this is true. I really think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, some of those interviews with the Games Workshop guys, some of the other guys have said, yeah, it wasn't this rule, it was some other rule rule set that we were using that really directly inspired it. But again, when you hear people talk about, I mean, this was published in 1981. And when you hear these game designers tell you, oh, yeah, sure, I remember 43 years ago, press X, all right? It's easy to say what you remember. But when you have 40 years between you and the event, and when you have a vested interest in remembering things in one particular way, because it kind of burnishes your reputation, you're more likely to do so. That's not to call any of these guys liars. Memory is a tricky thing. We build up these stories in our minds and we remember things from our own narrow perspective that maybe had just enough truth, maybe they didn't. So I want to take that with a huge grain of salt. People have read through this and they've pointed to some of the things like the weapons. And we'll take a look at those right here, right? There's a weapon here called the bolter, right? Laser pistol. Well, hold on. Laser pistol, laser rifle? That was the whole thing in the 70s. That's what they called the blasters in Star Wars. I think they call them laser pistols, didn't they? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's the term that they used in Buck Rogers. Yeah, that's a fairly universal thing, right? Oh, bolter. Now that's a little different. But here we have rapid fire heavy support. Brief digression. Can't help but notice assault rifle is not listed in here. Can't help but note, this is the point cost, by the way. I assigned a points cost of 5. That's a little bit more than a machine pistol, the same as a submachine gun. Kind of curious, right? That's kind of a big omission. This has the cost for hand flamers, but not your regular flamers. And it's kind of an important distinction here, because if we zoom on in on our firing chart, on our QRS, our quick reference sheet, If you take a look here, your flamers, you've got hand flamers. And hand flamers do template 2, and regular flamethrowers. See, it's not even called a flamer there. It's just called a flamethrower. Do template 1. We talked about this in the last episode. These would indicate that a hand flamethrower does this, and a full-size flamethrower does this. Well, that can't be. Okay, so that's a typo. Not that big a deal. And I find it hard to believe that this is the first game that had hand flamers and flamethrowers. Yeah, they show up in 40K, but I'm just not buying it. And granted, you have, we got a skull. Well, okay, it's that okay. Eagles. How many different empires have used the double-headed eagle? Right, Romans, Albanians, was it the Germans, Holy Roman Empire? I mean, you even see it in some of the Eastern culture. It's just a thing that shows up all the time. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying I have some doubts, particularly because our roll to wound system is so crazy. Well, it's not crazy, but it's so different, right? Because you've got this third axis here where once you have hit, you have to compare the weapon's power to the kind of armor that you're wearing, and the lighter armored you are, the more chances of a kill. This might maybe be streamlined down into a single D6, but the fact that your 2 hit roll is a 2D6, the fact that you've got 3 range bands here instead of the standard, I think Warhammer 40K was only the 2, short range and otherwise. I don't. You can see some of the same DNA. It's surely in the same family, but I just don't think it's as direct of a connection as the folk histories have made it out to be. So with all that said, there is a couple of other things I wanted to point out. We already pointed out a couple of little typos. Not a big deal, right? They happen. You had to type all this up by hand. That's kind of an endeavor, right? That took a while. If I had to do this, I would never be a game designer, which I'm not. But I did want to say, hey, I kind of suspected for a minute. Oh, you know what? Those missing rules, those missing items, maybe we should, as it says here, troop classification. Most are fairly self-explanatory. More detail to be found on the Laserburn rules. So you have this thing where they're pointing an arrow. Hey, here's how you're going to set up your guys. Take a look over here. And I thought, oh, so this is a direct sequel to this. Although, again, remember, this is a percentile system. This is a 2d6 roll to hit. For most of the regular actions, it's just a d6 succeed on a 5 or a 6. That's how artillery comes into play. That's how fixing your weapon comes into play. When you try to reload or repair your weapon, it's on a 5 or a 6. There's a number of other. I'm not going to get to. Melee. Oh, you want to move into melee? Roll a 5 or a 6, and you get to take a free action. You succeeded. It's kind of exploding. You get to take another action. So 2d6, some d6s, definitely percentile. Not a lot of connection there, which I guess makes a little bit of sense. After all, this is for 12 figures. This is for up to 50. It says on the tin. So, but wait a second. If it's up to 50, we're rolling 2 dice here, percentile. And we're rolling 2 dice here, 2d6. If you really wanted to streamline, there's probably better ways to do it. But also, going back to this concept of, well, geez, why don't you just go look in Laserburn? All right, let's do that. Let's just take a look real quick and I'm going to do that using the flamethrower as an example. Here in our weapons chart, you've got the hand flamer at 3 points. And, it occurs to me, maybe I should, troop characteristics, hand-to-hand weapons. Yeah, okay. Just double check. Just make sure I'm not going off half-cocked here. So the hand flamer costs 3 points. All right, let's take a look at the hand flamer in Laserburn, shall we? Well, here's our hand flamer. It costs 200 credits. Oh, okay. Well, if a hand flamer costs 200 credits, how much does our laser pistol cost? 50 credits. All right, now we'll come check the ratio here. 1/4 the cost for a laser pistol. Here, the hand flamer is 3. The laser pistol is 2. Oh, that's only 60% instead of 25. Yeah, there's no direct correlation between those two. So you're not really going to get a whole lot. The only reason I think that they point to Laserburn is that Laserburn actually talks a lot more about what specifically makes up your armor types. When you're buying your armor, when you're putting your boys together, Imperial Commander breaks it down into light armored power and dreadnought. And here it talks about the difference between flak and mesh. Some light armor plates on legs or arms. That's light infantry, flak or mesh jacket. Well, down here, we've got flak armor, it's a descendant of the 20th century, right? And then you've got, well, light armor is over here. So the lightly armored guys, the light infantry, are wearing flak. And there's flak and there's mesh, which is not underlined, which makes it a little confusing. But this is links of brightly polished armor plaz, which absorbs impact and deflects laser pulses. So in Laserburn, mesh and flak defend against two different things. Mesh defends against laser beams. Flak defends against kinetic weapons. In this Imperial Commander, they dispense with that. You do also have to worry about hit locations in Laserburn. In this, you do not. So I guess having gone through that little thought exercise, regardless of whether you're rolling 2d10s to get percentile or 2d6s, that's not where the simplicity, that's not where the streamlining comes in. The streamlining comes in with Imperial Commander. We should probably also talk about how devastating artillery is. Points cost way out of whack, way out of line. 15 points in order to drop this large of a fragmentation. I mean, this is, let me grab my little measuring stick here. This is, how far across is it? It's 13 and a half, 14 centimeters, depending on how you look at it. If you're dealing with a table that's only 60 centimeters across, that's almost a quarter of the table that you're dropping artillery on. Now, to be fair, you're only dropping it every third turn, right? Because you have to call it in and it's going to be a 5 or a 6. But for 15 points, if we just price this out, so I showed you my Ickwine a little bit earlier. Let's take a look here. What can you get for 15 points? Every third turn, you can get a template of this size, dropping high explosives on people. Or for the same price, you can get, who costs 15? These regular squaddies, they cost about 15 points. Just a regular guy, veteran, what is AI again? Armored infantry. So this is veteran armored infantry. One guy, 15 points. Or the half blast template. Crazy, man. That's what did me in. So I think the other lesson to take away from this is that Imperial Commander demands lots and lots of terrain. You have to stop those long sight lines. Those long sight lines are going to just destroy the battle. And I thought with all the little scatter terrain would be okay. Not the case, because there is no modifier for cover from this. If you can be seen, you can be acquired, you can be hit, you can be hurt. And that's going to be a real problem. So when we drop all of those extra boys on the table, we're going to have to drop a lot of woods, a lot of line of sight terrain. We really want to make it so that those forward observers have to get into position. They have to put themselves at risk where they can actually see the enemy that they're trying to attack. And the other thing that we talked about, I didn't really realize this was a problem until I started playing the game. There's no scatter templates in this. No scatter templates means, and it explicitly says in Imperial Commander, if you throw a grenade, you miss, it just disappears. It just enters the void. Now, for a regular hand grenade, you're only affecting a template this size. But if it can scatter back and donk you on the head, that really changes the math. If I'm calling this down and I can miss by up to 14 centimeters, that's like half the table that's covered. Now it can scatter and I can drop that right down on top of my own guys. And I got to be a lot more judicious about where I'm placing it. It also presents much more opportunity for fast movers to come to grips, to get close enough to your forward observer, to your main battle line, that you have to beg off. I know I spent 15 points. I can use this every third turn. I mean, maybe a couple of turns in a row, depending on how hot my dice are. But I'm not going to do that if there's a chance I'm killing my own guys. Probably not. Your orcs might, just because it's funny, but you know what I mean. the larger point to be made here is that scatter dice are a balancing mechanic that I don't think people appreciate well enough. I don't think I even appreciated it until I played a game that lacked it. When you've got this little bit of uncertainty into the game, man, it really does change the approach. It really does make you think about things in an entirely different way. And in a game where you're raining that much power, dropping it down onto the table, I think you're really doing yourself a disservice if you're not including scatter dice. The last thing we can really talk about here is the army lists. You know, you've got an Imperial Assault Group, Imperial Dreadnought Armor Force, Imperial Power Armor Platoon. I probably should have grabbed my Traveler books. A lot of the stuff that we see here, and in fact here, I think they even name check Traveler. Hey, if you don't like the Traveler combat system because it's not detailed enough, it's not generating the kind of tabletop miniature fights that you want, use Laserburn. Now, I, for one, like the Traveler combat system. I think it's smooth. It's theater of the mind. It does everything they need it to do so that you can get through the fight and get back to the role playing. But if you're using Traveler to generate tabletop miniature battles, then yeah, you're probably going to want something more like this. This suffers from that same conceit, I think. It's dialing into the same kind of late 70s sci-fi inspired by The Winds of Gath, E.C. Tubbs, long-running series about, what's his name? The guy looking for Earth. Anyway, E.C. Tubb. Brilliant. Definitely inspired Traveler. Definitely inspired this, right? You've got Imperial forces that control lots of planets. And again, the more you read about this, the less you see of 40K in it. Yeah, okay, so there's Redemptionists. It's the name of a faction. These guys have very little to do. In fact, if you look at this, you know, they're fanatics, sure, but they don't lean quite so heavily into the flames and the purgative power of burning things to the ground. Not quite the pyromaniacs that you see in 40K. All right, so we added that to them later, but again, I'm not seeing it. You know, you see a lot more of the 1990s, 2000, right? With the Colonial Police, these guys look, and I'm not the first one to point this out, with the jet copters, the police squad, these guys come charging in on bikes. They clearly wanted to emulate the kind of things they were reading in the comic books, which got rolled in, sure. But again, this is that kind of spicy melange where they were just throwing the kind of stuff that you would see in eerie comic books. There's a whole lot of coming together, of things coming together here, and moving forward into the 80s. When those guys had the nostalgia of, hey, remember 20 years ago when we were doing this kind of stuff, and they roll it in. Success has many fathers. I think this is just one, and I'm not even sure it's the most important. So kind of all over the place with this analysis video. Just want to push back a little bit on how much influence this had on Warhammer 40K. Now that I've played it, I'm not as convinced. I also wanted to push back against the idea that you can understand without playing, even though I'm probably not the best guy to talk because I've only played the one short game. But we'll play another game here pretty soon. We're going to throw a lot more guys on the table. Maybe they'll stick around a little bit longer. I will say this. This game was written at a different time. This game was written at a time where you were expected to have a lot more time on your hands than I do, and probably you as well. This was written at a time when people had 3, 4, 5 hours to play a game. They could show up and they could, have their forces, and they could argue about the terrain, and they could have 2,000 points worth of troops with 5 or 6 heroes and lots of detail on all of those. And they could take half an hour a turn. They could take 45 minutes if they wanted to, maybe go get some lunch, come back to the table. If you want the kind of get in, get the game done, and get out in like an hour or two, Xenos Rampant, that's your jam. This is a much more sedate. This is much more cigars and cognac. This is much more to be slowly savored. Take your time to work through the process. This is a wonderful game. The biggest thing that I want to message that I want to deliver to you is don't believe the folk history when it comes to the idea, the notion that Imperial Commander was abandoned because it wasn't fun or because it wasn't elegant enough. I don't even know what that means anymore. Oh, it's clunky. Other games have... No. They're not better. They're just different. This is a perfectly serviceable game that will provide you with a solid evening's entertainment if you meet it on its own terms. If you have a few hours to spare and you're willing to explore the game space, if you're willing to talk about the ramifications and really analyze how this game works, there is a world of delight to be found in Imperial Commander, and I hope that you won't reject it just because of one lady having a little nip slip there. I hope you won't reject it just because it's old. Speaking as something that is old myself, that's a terrible reason. There may be good reasons that this game isn't for you, but the fact that it's old is not one of them. And the fact that it has a reputation among people that have not played it as being clunky shouldn't put you off. Take it from someone who's been there. That's a pretty fun game. I enjoyed my time with it, and I think we're going to enjoy some more time with it here in the not too distant future. And until we do, I'm praying for you.